We recently saw Prime Minister Modi do a bilateral meeting in BRICS with Xi Jinping. Let's start about your thoughts on that meeting first, ma'am.
This was a major meeting also because we reached some sort of an agreement regarding restoration of India's patrolling rights at the borders.
And you didn't see it very positively.
China is not Russia for India. China is not the US for India. We will also do it in our own measured ways. Modi ji had talked about the 3 M's, 3 mutuals.
Border disputes are going to go away with this meeting.
Heavens forbid, even if India were to say that please take the territory, they disputed, it's yours. You think China is going to end at that? How on earth did Galwan emerge as a source of contention? Because before 2020, that was not something which China was laying claim to. China understands power. In the simplest of terms, understands only power. If India can negotiate from a position of power, things will be different. Initially when the Quad came up, China called it ocean froth. Should Pakistan be inducted or not? We talked about consensus in inducting new members.
Some red lines were made. The issue with Taiwan. There's another problem that is going to be coming up soon in that region.
Even in the South China Sea, fishing boats from say Vietnam, Philippines in particular, have been constant targets of China. Even the Taiwanese themselves don't think the US will come to their rescue.
No, just to counter that, ma'am, because US is a maritime power. US has full right and full, potential to be a part of it.
It has a right, it has a choice.
Today, we are joined by a familiar expert, Dr Sriparna Pathak, who brings her depth of knowledge on China and South Asia to this conversation. This episode couldn't be more timely as we break down the latest between India and China, focusing on the recent interaction between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi at the BRICS summit. The strategic language around mutual respect and sovereignty. But that's not all. Our conversation spans the anti-China stance in Quad, the growing role of BRICS as a global player, and even China's role in the ongoing Israel-Iran conflict. From trade dynamics to the Indo-Pacific, to China's challenges at home, and the shifting global power plays in West Asia. Dr. Pathak gives us a comprehensive view of where India stands and how these geopolitical shifts might shape our future. Let's dive in to understand the complexities of India-China relations, the impact of new BRICS members, and much more in the enlightening episode with Dr. Sriparna Pathak. Without further ado, let's get started. Before we dive into today's conversation, I just wanted to take a quick moment. We looked at our analytics and noticed that 93% of you who watch our videos regularly aren't subscribed yet. If you're enjoying our content and want us to keep going with more insightful conversation, we'd really appreciate if you could take just a second to subscribe. It might seem like a small action, but it goes a long way in helping us grow and bringing even more amazing content your way. Thanks for your support. It means the world to us. Now let's get back to the video. We recently saw Prime Minister Modi do a bilateral meeting in BRICS with Xi Jinping and China. Let's start about your thoughts on that meeting first, ma'am.
So it was an important meeting because, after 5 long years, the others which have happened have just been very minor and on the sideline. So this was a major meeting also because we reached some sort of an agreement just before that. It was announced from India's side regarding restoration of India's patrolling rights at the borders. So it was definitely an important meeting, and both India and China are important members of not just the BRICS, but because, after 5 long years, the others which have happened have just been very minor and on the sideline. So this was a major meeting also because we reached some sort of an agreement just before that. It was announced from India's side regarding restoration of India's patrolling rights at the borders.
And you didn't see it very positively. Why would you say that?
If you see in relative terms, right? When we did go to the BRICS and, Prime Minister Modi met Putin, you see the body language. And I think that makes it obvious and evident as to how India sees Russia or how Russia also sees India. There was a bear hug as well, the traditional Modi-style bear hug, which has also been done with the US, with Biden, despite the fact, whatever political problems that we have with the US. You didn't see that bear hug with Xi Jinping, which makes it very clear that while we do understand it's important to talk, it's important to engage, we reserve the right and we will see countries for what they truly are to India. China is not Russia for India. China is not the US for India. So, which is why while we have to engage, we are a part of the international community and very important ones, we will also do it in our own measured ways. Even during the, when there was the bilateral, it roughly went on for 50 minutes. And a lot of time in that was taken by the translation. So the actual meeting was pretty short, if you reduce the translation time. I think the timing also says quite a lot about it, as to how much time we want to invest it, what we really think about the meeting, etc. And Modi ji had talked about the 3 M's, 3 mutuals, right? In a very typical Prime Minister Modi style, he said that mutual respect is important. Why do you think he would emphasize mutual respect if China was really that big a friend and the meeting was, all hunky and dory? Why would he mention respect, talked about sovereignty, etc. He didn't talk about sovereignty with Russia. He didn't talk about sovereignty with South Africa or with Egypt or any of the new inductees, right? So while the meeting was a positive step, I won't read too much into it.
Do you think our trade relations, which are anyway so high, are going to be more boosted because of this, and our border disputes are going to go away with this meeting?
The border disputes, unfortunately, will not go away because it's a long, protracted conflict. China doesn't adhere to the line of actual control, doesn't adhere to the Shimla agreement, which it had signed but not ratified. So it continues. The boundary dispute just goes on and on and on. And we try a lot of mechanisms. We've been trying from the time that we got independence, 1947, and then, but none of that has really worked. And why it has not worked is to do with how China sees it. It's not like, heavens forbid, even if India were to say that please take the territory, they disputed, it's yours. That's not going to happen. But hypothetically, even if we were to do that, do you think China is going to end at that? It's going to be newer territories. Galwan, how on earth did Galwan emerge as a source of contention? Because before 2020, that was not something which China was laying claim to. But all of a sudden it comes in and it becomes a bone of contention. So it's just going to be newer things from China. It's because of the power differentials which India has with China. China understands power. And in the simplest of terms, understands only power. If India can negotiate from a position of power, things will be different. Now, if you see the ways in which India negotiates with China and the ways in which China responds to it is very different from even, say, 10 years ago. It's because, touchwood, India's economic powers is increasing, India's diplomatic stature is increasing, and so on. Unfortunately, the boundary dispute, I don't see it getting resolved very easily. Even this agreement, we are calling it an agreement. It's actually just a restoration of our patrolling rights. It is not a resolution of the boundary dispute. We are calling it an agreement. What is China calling it? China is calling it a solution. The usage of words is very important. A solution can be temporary, is temporary in fact, a temporary fix. An agreement is binding, it's long. So that shows our hopes. We are calling it an agreement and hoping that China also thinks in the same terms. But China does not. Even their leadership, Xi Jinping, has said that in principle, China agrees to it. What is in principle? Right? So this had to be done. So it was done from China's side. Why did it do it at this juncture? Maybe we can talk about that. Our economy, are we opening up the economy again all over to them? As of yesterday, we've slapped more tariffs on some Chinese goods because Chinese companies regularly violate our economic trade laws inside of India. They don't adhere to laws and norms. When you operate in a country, you have to adhere to the norms. China does not do that. We are among the countries which slap the highest number of tariffs at the WTO on China. Why do we do that? China violates our laws. Last week also we had slapped tariffs on them. So unless China gives us that respect on the ground, in the political realm, in the economic realm, things are not going to be okay because it's about mutual trust, equality. So
I hope Prime Minister Modi's team, and I'm sure they can read between the lines and they will make the decisions according to in terms of diplomacy. But what you said, I have 2 points to add to it. two reasons why China would want to, collaborate with us and be at peace with us now, to show that they're at peace. One could be that they know how big of an economy we are in terms of doing business. The other one, which is more important, maybe you can add to it as well, is we recently attended the Quad in the US, which was the other three members, Australia, Japan, and US was trying to make it a anti-China kind of sentiment within the group. But India would stand and said that this is an economic development group, and that's what we're going to stand as. Do you think this is one of the reasons why China is seeing us in a positive light at the moment as well?
The first reason, yes, definitely yes. China's economy is faltering. While China might say its economy is growing at 4% or something, independent analysts who can give you facts and statistics as opposed to this black box of data which happens in China, it's not growing at more than 1.2%, right? India's is growing at roughly, last quarter was 8%. They would want to leverage. India's, as stated by the IMF, India has the highest growth rates in the world right now. We have positive demographics and so on. China would want to leverage India's market. But there are these strongholds against Chinese investments because China wants to invest in the sensitive sectors of Indian economy. Why would a rational state like India allow that? Especially when we are in a conflict, especially when China doesn't respect our economic laws and so on. They would want to leverage India's market. So which is why they hope that we, become gullible enough and open up, let go of some of the strongholds. China has also unleashed a whole set of charm offensives on us through their embassies, spokespersons, etc., trying to placate India, talking about how India and China could economically cooperate and so on. US and EU are slapping tariffs left, right and center on China. US and EU have been the biggest markets for China, also because they are, the industrialized global north countries which have more absorption, traditionally have had more absorption capacities for Chinese goods. But if you just look at electronic vehicles, US has slapped 100% tariffs on them, right? Similarly, similar figures for EU as well.
Is it just the EVs that they have tariffs on?
Solar panels as well, a long list of products from China. So China needs alternative markets. Where can it look to? It can look to the biggest market, the biggest emerging economy with the highest growth rates in the world, which happens to be India. So it would think that maybe something like this can placate India. But again, look, these are two different things. The military domain is the military domain. Geographic sovereignty is geographic sovereignty. Our economic sovereignty is also important. Not respecting laws is something that we cannot really, which we can afford. Also, we don't have equal market access in China. Indian products suffer tariff and non-tariff barriers in China. So it's not egalitarian. Coming to the question about the Quad, see, Quad is not a military grouping. It never was, right? China has, initially when the Quad came up, when Shinzo Abe had first mentioned it, etc., China called it ocean froth, something which would dissipate, right? But from then to now, in roughly say 10 years, now it calls it Asian NATO. Whereas it's not a military agreement, which makes it clear that China clearly thinks of the Asian NATO, of the NATO.
Now, another thing that happened on BRICS, this summit, was there was 5 more nations that were added to the BRICS. What do you think that would do towards, in terms of, the world looks like a multipolar world now, and that's what we have realized as well. Do you think the addition of 5 more countries is a problem for the US?
I'm sure the US would not be very happy because, roughly and unfortunately, the attempts from Russia and China are to somehow turn it into an anti-West sort of thing, which doesn't work well for us, which is why this time even Prime Minister Modi said that let's not turn it into something anti-West because then it becomes completely political. We are thinking of economic partnerships through the BRICS and addressing common problems. We don't want to create more problems. The moment it becomes ideological, anti-West, blocks, something like that, things get paralyzed. Political problems can never lead to economic solutions, whereas economic solutions might still ease things up. right? So which is why within the aegis of this expanded BRIC, this time again, if you listen to all the key statements made by Prime Minister Modi, again he invoked G20 and he reiterated some of the things that we mentioned during the G20, things which matter to the global south. We also talked about a BRICS payment system. The US, of course, wouldn't be happy because de-dollarization. Look, we've never said yes to yuanization. We've always blocked that because that also doesn't work well for us. But yes, why not have a BRICS currency system? So we said yes to that as well.
What could that be?
No one really knows the name, and there are lots of creative ideas being floated around. Maybe use one letter from each country's name and so on. How that's going to look at, is it really rhetoric? Is it actually going to play out? Is it actually going to pan out? I think we'll have to wait for at least 6 to 8 months and then take a call on that. But at least in principle, it has been stated. Maybe it was an optic to show to the US, to the West, that look, we want a multilateral world, and so which is why we'll be part of things which matter to the global south and so on. Or maybe it was just just because China and Russia might have pushed for it. But look, we also talked about terrorism within the aegis of the BRICS. We talk constantly about terrorism at the UN or at any agency, at any international organization, regional organization, because it affects us deeply. There is a state sponsor of terror living next to us, and another country, China, tacitly supporting the state sponsor of terror, right? So we spoke about terrorism and a very subtle jibe at China as well, that state should not support terrorism, So we did that also. So it's not like we are joining some anti-US bloc or anti. We are talking about things which matter to countries, of course to us. Every country is rational, every country is selfish, every country thinks first about its own national interest. So it's high time we also do that, and we are doing that. But also terrorism is an issue which affects a lot of others as well. So we mentioned that. Very smartly and tacitly, when the question of Pakistan arose, should Pakistan be inducted or not, we talked about consensus in inducting new members.
Some red lines were made.
Yeah. So very smartly it was again done because again, look, in BRICS, what exactly would Pakistan do? These countries, again, if you see in the expanded membership also, one might say that again, they are not the best performing countries in the world. But which is the best performing country in the world right now? Again, it's going to be India and unfortunately or unfortunately China and a few others and so on. Every other country is performing really poorly. So we pick up the ones which align with our economic interests, our trade interests, and at least we can do something positive with them. So that's the whole thing about why we went to the BRICS, what we did inside the BRICS. We are not making it an anti-US or anti-West bloc. We are not joining some sort of an India, Russia, China grouping or bloc. We are not doing something malicious over there. We are not endorsing the BRI. We are doing things to steer clear of political problems. China and Russia can have their problems with the West, and they can fight their own battles. We have no doubts that they are capable enough. US also has its capabilities. Let them fight their own battles. What is our battle? We will fight that. What is important to us? We will address that.
Honestly, I'm really proud of the Indian diplomacy that has been going on for the last, and these are very exciting times for geopolitics for people like us who are really into it. For why we saw showcasing our strategic autonomy first in Quad and now in BRICS. We've been seeing as a peacemaker in Russia and Ukraine. We try to do meetings with both the key persons in the conflict. Now we also interacted with the supreme leader of Iran at BRICS. What kind of message are we showing to the rest of the world that how the caliber of India is in terms of diplomacy and peace?
So I think, as of yesterday or maybe today morning, once it was reported, the King of Bhutan also said India is the solution. Look, we don't join camps, right? And we don't take sides based on others' interests. Someone else's war is not our war. Just the way our war is not anyone else's war. What the world thinks of Iran, okay, fair enough. But, even historically, Iran has been a partner. Iran has been a friend. We've got historical, migrational, civilizational ties with them. Iran has been a key partner in oil supplies, etc. Of course, Israel is a friend as well. And this is where it becomes difficult. If heavens forbid something goes terribly off, and if we are forced to take sides, it's going to be very difficult for us to take sides. We don't want to take sides, but heavens forbid we are forced to take sides. Israel is a friend. It's been one of our key suppliers of arsenals, arms, weaponry, etc., which we need because we have Pakistan. We live next to Pakistan and China. Israel has also supported us constantly on the issue of Kashmir. Israel is a friend, right? Israel also suffers from terrorism the way we suffer. So we have linkages, but then there's Iran as well. So we hope that things don't come to a very terrible inflection point, and we don't really have to take sides. We want to be friends with everyone, which is why we use the term Vishwamitra. Look, wars cannot be resolved only through force. It has to be a good mix of a positive approach, discussions, negotiations, as well as the use of power or force, which is something which India tries to do. Our approaches are not, on the lines of being a bully, the way it is in the US or it is even in China. We don't want to be a bully and force solutions. We'd rather talk and get to a solution. At the same time, when we exhibit politeness, when we are talking, we ensure that's not seen as weakness. So that's a mix which is needed. So let's hope it works out. Let's hope it leads to positive results sooner than later.
That's what we need in today's time, a good mix between hard and soft power. That in geopolitics, we definitely need that. And India's showcasing really how it's done as well, ma'am. Can we briefly also speak about China's role in West Asia at the moment in the conflict between Israel and Iran?
Well, from day one, a lot of weaponry which were used by Hamas terrorists had origins in China. I think the IDF, Israel Defense Forces, have made it public quite a lot of times. Weaponry was from them, training was from them, tunnel making was from them. So China clearly has a role. It might not really have come out in the open, the ways in which Iran's role in sponsoring proxies has been. But, yes, China had a pretty much role. And again, contrasting it with India's approach, China has taken one side, clearly. We have said that while there should be a two-state solution, again, Israel has a right to defend itself when it's terrorism. Terrorism has no place in the 21st century. But China somehow missed the terrorism bit, and it took, it's been, whatever it has been saying, it has not been very supportive of a state or of a people who have been affected by terrorism on October 7th. So China has taken a stance. It's not like it's taking this political stance because it is it has great sympathies for suffering people or so on, as it wants to show. There's economic interest, as simple as that, because it would not want to lose the support of the Arab states, oil supplies, energy supplies, and so on. So which is why it has done that. But yes, when a country or an organization supports, say we use the term supports something, the support might not always be in verbal terms. It might be very subtle in the supply of weapons, in the supply of plans, in the supply of phones, intercoms, etc., which is what China did. Again, so it has a role in this terrorism which was unleashed on Israel. So it has a role in West Asia as well. So it tries to project itself as a peacemaker because of the last year's deal between
Iran and Saudi.
But the fact is that the deal was pretty much close to completion when China decided to jump in. And then that gave it the opportunity to show itself as a peacemaker, etc. It wants to do all of that because it can show itself as a better partner than the US and get continuous supply of oil, energy, and so on. So, yes, the West Asian theatre is a very important facet for even China.
Politics.
Yes, for China.
There is a narrative that I want to throw at you. Please tell me what you feel about it. In West Asia, of course, there's a narrative that China is fueling this war against Israel because it knows that US will be busy with supporting Israel. And that would take on, give it more resources and energy for itself to grow. and replace US as a superpower. What do you think of this narrative?
Interesting one. And I think there could be a bit of merit in it. Because, not just because, US just keeps busy in West Asia, but if the US can be shown as a supporter of Israel, and unfortunately Israel doesn't have the popular support, especially on social media.
Not anymore.
Yeah, does not. I don't know what went wrong really, but despite the fact that there were images of terrorism which were circulated by Hamas terrorists themselves, the sympathy is not with Israel. The sympathy is largely with the terrorists. Anyways, so China would want US to come off as a supporter of a country which is going and bombing populations, hospitals, children, and so on, right? Israel secondary, US then loses this whole perception which it would want to keep of itself as a stabilizer or as the leader of the world. Can a leader of the world be supporting a country that is destroying civilizations, right? Whereas China can present a better face. See, to gain the leadership of the world, it's not always hard power. You also have to persuade countries.
True.
Antonio Gramsci, that's why years ago in Prison Notebooks had talked about he had talked about soft power, and he had talked about how persuasion is important. How can China persuade countries that it's a better fit than the US? Exhibit the US as being a leader which is unfit to be the leader. And the second best option is the better option.
Great answer, ma'am. Thank you so much for that. There's one thing that you are being supportive of a lot of conflicts which is far, far away from you. Like we see in Russia and Ukraine, supportive of Russia. We're talking about China, of course. And in West Asia, supposed for Iran. What about a conflict which is on their own background as well? Their own backdrop, which is the South China Sea and the issue with Taiwan. Do you think there's another problem that is going to be coming up sooner or later in that region?
See, the problem already exists, right? Even in the South China Sea, fishing boats from, say, Vietnam, Philippines in particular, have been constant targets of China. Even as recently as, say, 2 weeks ago, October 1st, October 2nd, Vietnamese fishing boats or fishing personnel were attacked by China. Vietnam had labeled it as being very brutal. Philippines had lent support to Vietnam by stating that, yes, this is very wrong. China has created artificial islands, and that's how it keeps extending its claims. 9-dash line becomes 10-dash line and so on, right? So South China Sea is a problem. It's hugely rich in minerals. China needs resources, mineral resources and territory. So it will keep the South China Sea issue alive. South China Sea also gets complicated because there are a lot of claimants. ASEAN countries themselves have overlapping claims. So that's another huge issue. So it's not just China versus ASEAN. It's also, Vietnam versus Philippines versus Malaysia versus so on, right? Versus Taiwan.
That is a problem because then they cannot be on the same
United.
page. They can't unite themselves against the bigger adversary.
Absolutely. So that's the problem. So which country is going to actually call out China's artificial artificial island building? Can it be a united stance? Anyways, ASEAN says that, we will not talk about politics. That's the ASEAN way. So South China Sea is a deep mess, and China leverages wherever there's a mess to its own advantage. Taiwan, in the 20th Party Congress speech, Xi Jinping had talked about regional wars, which is the region that China is in, Asia. So with which countries could it have wars within Asia? Which other countries? Of course, India, Asian country. Boundary dispute lives on. Taiwan, across the straits, and reunification of Taiwan. There could be Japan, because Senkaku Islands dispute, or it could be ASEAN. But he had talked about regional wars. Even 2 weeks ago, again, he told his military to be prepared for a war. Which war are they preparing for? So the countries which already have territorial disputes have to be on their guard, including us. With regards to Taiwan, yes, very often China tries to bully them. There are water cannons or a display of might in the cross straits region and so on. So Taiwan is, of course, it's small in size. It doesn't have the military wherewithal which the second most populated country of the world would have. It doesn't have those sorts of defenses which China would have. So, of course, it is worried. What is preventing China from unleashing a fully blown attack? Two things. First, of course, are its own economic questions. You need money to go and fight, but your own economy is not really doing that well right now, first. Second, would the US enter the theater of conflict? That's a big question mark. Look, the US didn't even enter the Ukrainian theater, didn't put its boots on the grounds. But is there a guarantee that it would not put its boots on the grounds in Taiwan?
You don't think so?
Even the Taiwanese themselves don't think the US will come to their rescue.
But because of the region is that area is so important for trade. It of course reflects on the trade with the US and Japan.
Japan has openly said that if anything happens, it will come. See, when you're very sure that you are going to do something, you openly proclaim it, which is what Japan has done. US has not said anything, ever. The Taiwanese themselves are not very sure that the US is going to come to their rescue. But maybe Quad will get pulled in. Maybe directly Quad countries will not send in armies. But there can be intelligence sharing. There can be refueling facilities which can be allowed to maybe say US ships if they come in, or US aircraft, and so on.
No, just to counter that, ma'am, because US is a maritime power and this region includes a lot of maritime. US has full right and full potential to be a part of it.
Has a right, of course. But does it mean it will actually come? It has a choice as well. It has a right, it has a choice. If Donald Trump comes to power, Donald Trump very clearly said a couple of months ago that,
need money for every
exactly.
safeguard.
There's a choice, right? So that might just really happen. So Taiwanese themselves, so they've been preparing on their own. There's conscription now of the able-bodied men beyond 18 years of age and so on. So that's a big source of concern. But China, will it attack? Look, the US military keeps saying a lot of things, giving a lot of different years and so on. So which is why it's very difficult to predict. But as I see it, till there is an economic problem in China, which I think is going to last for some time at least, it doesn't have the wherewithal. So which is why it will plan. It'll do other things to keep the US busy so that the choice which the US has to not come to Taiwan's rescue, US actually exercises that. If it's already stuck because of West Asia, because of Russia, Ukraine and so on. If China, through its very tacit support through certain things, can open up more theaters of conflict, and US exercises its choice to not come to Taiwan's rescue, and Donald Trump comes to power and lives up to his promise of not meddling in arenas beyond the US, then yes, China will definitely do it. Because look, Xi Jinping has been talking about Taiwan constantly and how it is a part of the motherland. So there is that hope, there is that ambition. It's just when exactly. Very difficult to make that prediction.
Can there be a connect between Taiwan and South China Sea?
Could be. But if South China Sea happens, then, Philippines has been displaying a lot of, it's like a David and Goliath sort of story. Philippines will definitely, charge back. It will definitely fight back. Taiwan will also, whatever it can do, it will fight back, South China Sea is an issue. We will do things diplomatically because 55 to 60% of our trade passes through that
there,
region.
Yeah.
Other countries will also do things diplomatically. So maybe they won't merge the two theaters of conflict because it's going to be more parties will come in then. But yeah, Taiwan, since they say that Taiwan is a part of the motherland, look, they speak the same language and all those narratives. One day it should come back to the motherland. I think Taiwan would be the first country in Asia which might really bear the brunt. We are already bearing it. So, patrolling will be restored in a few days and so on. But that doesn't mean the dispute has been resolved. But I think Taiwan.
Right. Quickly, we'll also touch about the Indo-Pacific, man, and how India has his strengths in Indo-Pacific and how China tries to counter it.
See, the Indo-Pacific, it's a huge enough region, right? Um, and it has a lot of mineral resources. It definitely has the Quad countries in it. And, almost every other country which, cares about its trade and its linkages to this particular arena is coming up with some Indo-Pacific strategy. So, which is why India also tries to cooperate wherever there are alignments in our Indo-Pacific vision, in other countries' Indo-Pacific strategies and so on, in exploration of minerals or freedom of navigation, openness of the seas, no country should block it, and so on. So it's an important arena. We are not going around blocking access, whereas China wants to block access. Very different approaches. If China wants to present itself as a responsible player, but then in the Indo-Pacific region, its military aggressions are constantly growing. It's building all these artificial islands. It's constantly either verbally or in some ways attacking other countries of the Indo-Pacific, going into their exclusive economic zones, depleting their marine resources. It doesn't look like a responsible player. Whereas India doesn't do any of that. We, on the other hand, try and see with other partners where can we cooperate, where can we collaborate. There's this thing about illegal fishing, which has come up very commonly right now. We also are trying to understand theoretically what should we label as illegal fishing. Do our definitions fall in line with, say, countries of the Indo-Pacific, ASEAN countries, so on? What can we mutually learn? How can we cooperate in preventing IUU, illegal fishing and so on, depletion of marine resources? So our approaches are different. It's not to say that India wants to be a leader or anything, but India wants stability. India wants peace and stability. And which is why we believe in cooperations, collaborations, partnerships. It does not mean India wants to replace the US or China. China wants to replace US, it's its own fight, let it do whatever it wants to do. US doesn't want China to replace it. Again, we are very confident that the US can prevent that. It is not our business. We don't want to get into this fight. Our first and foremost need is peace and stability. We are thinking of growing economically. Every country which has grown economically, be it China, be it Japan, be it South Korea, has had a stable periphery. We also want that stable periphery. So which is why we want peace and stability in the truest of terms.
Well said. Do you think it's important to speak about China's internal situation right now, the problems that they're going through?
So China is definitely, economically not doing well. Definitely. Real estate has crashed. Banking has crashed. Unemployment, youth unemployment is at such a high level that last year they decided they're not going to publish statistics anymore on youth unemployment and so on. Aging is a crisis. Old age or the aging population is a huge crisis. Total fertility rates have crashed, which is why Xi Jinping is trying to very smartly coerce women into marriages or having more babies and so on. But unfortunately, that's also not happening. So it's a big mess. A few weeks ago, a stimulus was being talked about, that the government is going to provide a stimulus. Again, details are very sketchy. Hasn't happened so far. So why would a government think of a stimulus? If the economy is doing so well, it doesn't really need a stimulus. But it is doing really badly right now in all segments. China is an export-oriented economy. Its growth has been export-led, which is why manufacturing grew to this extent. And they kept exporting goods. But now countries have become more inward-looking. And no one trusts Chinese products. Which is why, especially after the US-China trade war started and so on, countries are not okay with the absorption of Chinese goods. So what does China now do with the goods? There's an oversupply problem as well. So it's a terrible situation for China to be in now. But it's because of its strategy of economic growth, which is export-led, subsidies-driven and so on. That's no longer working anymore. Their domestic consumption levels are really low. A good enough, decent domestic consumption ensures that your own people can consume your goods, which is what happens in India quite a lot of times, right? We do have MNCs. We do have a lot of products from abroad. And we have different classes in our society which can absorb certain products. But our domestic consumption is decent enough. FDI. Almost every country is rethinking. Should it stay in China or should it go? FDI has gone to a 22-year low in China. Never before has it happened this way. Every foreign company is fearful that it will get raided, because of Xi Jinping's national security law, anti-espionage law, his whole emphasis on constantly security. It has basically made sure that any company can be raided on any grounds. Any foreign company. So that's not really rule of law, and foreign companies also, when they operate, it's anyways difficult to operate outside your own domain, because you understand new laws. But now there are these laws which change on a daily basis, almost daily basis. So foreign companies are rethinking if they should stay in China or go elsewhere, which is why this whole strategy of China plus one has come in, a business strategy, wherein companies are looking at other Asian countries to relocate to. So the Chinese economy needs a reset, clearly, of course. And it's not, let's just put it as not doing really well.
Wow. We've been around the globe in the last 45 minutes, ma'am. We've covered so much. Just to finish our conversation, our closing remarks on India-China relations, ma'am, if you could give me some.
India-China relations...
And the future of it, of course.
Of course. It's going to be a volatile situation for quite some time. And that doesn't mean that we should not continue talking, because we are a democracy and the world's largest democracy. Since we believe and want peace, it is imperative that we keep talking. They may or may not really lead to results in the ways that we expect, but we don't really have any other choice. We have a power differential with China. The best way to negotiate with China is through a position of power. So which is why India will have to ensure that it grows economically strong enough, internal balancing as we call it in theoretical terms. If we can do that, then the dynamics might change a bit. The boundary dispute is not going to get resolved not so easily, unfortunately. China will not give up the claims ever. It doesn't want to look like a weaker part. Neither will we, because sovereignty is something which cannot be bartered off. So this volatile situation is going to stay. Patrolling rights, again, I hear that in the next 4 days, patrolling rights would be restored. Let's hope that patrolling rights are restored. But that's only about patrolling rights. China has not said disengagement, which very well means that our army, the Indian army, is again in for another terrible, long haul, a very cold, freezing winter. So we'll have to be cautious with China. It's not given us any evidence that it can be trusted. It says something and does the exact opposite, especially with India. So, but I'm sure our military, our agencies, our leadership is aware of that, is prepared for that. And we just have to live with a difficult situation for some time to come.
Wow. Always a pleasure having you over, ma'am. Always lovely interacting with you. So it's so much insights that you throw at me that I have to make notes at the end of the day. It was quite insightful for me. I'm sure it's been for the audience as well, ma'am.
Thank you so much. It's always wonderful engaging with you, and you do excellent work.
Hope to see you very soon again. We at TOAP are working really hard to take this podcast to the next level. Our guests are going to get even better. Our production quality is going to get even better. And hopefully, I'm going to get even better too. Most importantly, we are committed to being consistent and continue to do what we love the most. Until then, keep reimagining yourself and know that the power of change lies within you. Jai Hind.